When the students of today are the teachers of tomorrow, what will they say about the year 2020? Will this be the year that changed education forever? The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated existing inequalities in education systems everywhere. At the same time, we have all admired the educators, parents, students, and communities that have banded together to meet this challenge. The HundrED 2020 Innovation Summit will connect inspiring innovators with educators, researchers, policy leaders, education ministries, students, and parents from around the world. Join us at this free virtual event to share your experiences and learn from like-minded changemakers from over 100 countries. You will also hear from our global collection of leading innovators in K-12 education who are pioneering solutions that help provide quality education for all, no matter what happens. Register now at www.hundred.org/summit.
Hello everyone, my name is Romaine. I am the head of projects at HundrED. Welcome to day 2 of the HundrED Innovation Summit. We had an incredible day yesterday where we celebrated our spotlight on creativity with the LEGO Foundation and the launch of the 2021 Global Collection. If you missed it, don't despair. This will be available on our social media channels and on the Attendify app. So as a young person, I wasn't always excited about education. That's until one of my mentors said to me, you know, Romaine, I never want you to complain about education because education breaks the barriers of prejudice. I found that to be particularly true for myself. Education breaks a multitude of barriers. And personally for me, I've been able to live, work, and study in 6 countries across 4 continents because of education. And that's why I'm particularly passionate about our conversation today, where we are talking about quality education for all and what this really means for us to help children flourish when they're coming from low resource environments where they do not have the same learning opportunities. It is estimated that in low to middle income countries, only 53% of the children that are under the age of 10 can read. These numbers are staggering, but what we do know is that when we have the greatest challenges, we also have some of the best solutions. As a matter of fact, and as Saku mentioned yesterday, 40% of the innovations in our global collection are actually founded in the Global South. This brings us to today's question. Will the next education revolution come from the most challenging learning environments? Well, to help us answer this question, we're going to hear from education leaders and innovators from Latin America, Africa, and Asia. They will share some of their challenges and learnings from this year and the next solutions and inspirations which are coming from the Global South. To kick us off, we're going to hear from Fred Swaniker. He is the founder of the African Leadership Group. He was selected to Time Magazine's list of 100 most influential people in the world. Fred, who is also passionate about unlocking the potential of Africa, will share his perspective on what quality education means within the African context. Enjoy.
My background is I'm originally from Ghana, but at the age of 4, I left and I moved to another country in West Africa called Gambia, and then I went to Botswana and to Zimbabwe. So I really grew up as a child of Africa. As a result of that, I fell in love with Africa, and I wanted to see it, become a very peaceful and prosperous continent. And I was always wondering what was stopping us from achieving that potential. It became clear to me over time as I matured that it was really about education, and that unless we could develop the minds of our people, we could never really achieve our full potential. When people look at Africa, they think about our natural resources like gold and diamonds and minerals. But I really came to see that the real wealth of Africa is its people. And that's what motivated me to really think about how do we unlock the potential of these people. Another aspect of my background is that my family has been involved in education institutions for a couple of generations. My grandmother started a school, my mother started a school, and when I was about 18 years old, actually, my dad passed away, and my mother was approached by many teachers in the town we lived in Botswana to start a school. And she said, well, I can't start a school. My husband has just died. I've got 4 children to look after. But they kept insisting. So she eventually created a school, and she made me the headmaster of the school when I was 18. So I ran the school for a year. I learned how to manage the school, how to teach, and how to lead other teachers and so forth. And it was, and what I saw was the tremendous impact that we could have on young people in that 1 year when I was running the school. And so that, I would say, then ignited the rest of my work, which led me to start the African Leadership Academy, African Leadership University, and now ALX. And collectively now, we're on a mission to develop 3 million leaders for Africa over the next 15 years. Well, I think equal education in African context, I would assume it's probably similar in other contexts around the world, which is really, for me, about unlocking human potential for all. So irrespective of your race, your gender, your national origin, your sexual orientation, any other barriers that have historically prevented people from truly fulfilling their potential. It means removing, making education accessible to people irrespective of any of those barriers. It also means education that is affordable. Today's too many children are out of school simply because they cannot afford to pay the fees that might be charged, so this for me is really about almost like a human right, in that every person on this earth deserves to have their full potential unlocked. And until we have that goal achieved, we will not really have reached our full potential as a human race. So that for me is one of the most important things that needs to happen. And when I look at it from an African perspective, the greatest potential that still needs to be unlocked in the world is sitting in Africa right now. And then that's why this is such an important issue, not just for Africa, but for the whole world. Well, in the very short term, the situation is not looking good because so many young people in Africa live in rural areas where they don't have access to broadband internet. And even if they do have access, maybe through their mobile phone, they don't always have electricity. And so tens of millions of young people right now are not learning. That's on the one side. That is obviously quite disturbing, and it's in a way setting us back from the progress we have made. Because Africa had made a lot of progress in the past. If you think about it, when Ghana got independence in 1957, there was something like 22,000 university graduates in the whole of sub-Saharan Africa, if you exclude South Africa. And 18,000 of those graduates came from Ghana and Nigeria. So a country like the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, they had 34 university graduates when they became independent. Today, there are 11 million people studying in universities at any given time in Africa. So it's a massive change. And so we made a lot of progress, but moments like this are setting us back in a way. However, I say that that's a short-term problem, because one of the things I really believe is that crises have a way of accelerating things that we've been dragging our feet on for a while. So we're starting to see some pockets of innovation, like digital, is rising, increasing, rapidly, and people are really leveraging even things like SMS, mobile phones, not even smartphones. Teachers are teaching; they're using WhatsApp to teach. And so you're seeing all this exciting innovation that's happening where because teachers still care about their students, and they're trying to break through all these barriers that this moment is creating. So it's actually quite exciting to see the innovations that are coming out. And, another thing that we're seeing is that people are starting to really think about educating people for the jobs of the future. And it's also finally, so I think in the long term, this is actually going to accelerate the pace of innovation in Africa, because we don't have many of the systems that are preventing innovation from happening in like in the rest of the world. And we have much more incentive to innovate in Africa than anywhere else in the world. In Africa, we've always had lots of constraints. So when you have constraints, for example, in Africa, we don't have a lot of money. We don't have a lot of time. We have the fastest growing population in the world. We have the youngest population in the world. The average age of an African is 19. The average age of a German or Japanese is 47. And Africa will have the largest workforce in the world by 2035. So all of these factors mean that there's massive demand for education and there's very limited supply. Primary school enrollment rates are about 80%. Secondary school enrollment rates are less than 40%, and tertiary enrollment rates are only about 8%. So we cannot do things the conventional way when you have that kind of situation. You need to just be completely unconventional and radical and reimagine everything. And so many of those innovations have been coming up, but now there's even one more constraint, which is, we can't learn in person, and we need to really think about how we digitize. So this is we're not going to go back to just the normal way after COVID is over. Because of the length of this pandemic, it's really forcing people to learn how to do things in a new way. And so I believe that we're going to see a massive wave of innovation in education that is going to remain after COVID is over. Well, young people in Africa have expectations primarily of one thing. They need jobs, right? Because they need livelihood, and again, it's the fastest growing population. It will soon be the largest workforce in the world, larger than China, larger than India. So the way that, so really what the continent needs, what young people are looking for is education that prepares them to either be highly employable or to be able to create their own jobs as entrepreneurs. So I think that, that entrepreneurial thinking needs to truly be infused in all kind of education that we're seeing in Africa today to be able to really prepare young people for the world of the future. We also need to think about how do we prepare them to be adaptable, right? So learning how to learn is much more important now than what they learn, because we don't know what the jobs of the future will be. So they've got to really learn how to be agile, adaptable, and to learn new things as the world changes. The other thing that young people are expecting now is they live in a global village. And, before maybe young Africans who are looking for opportunity might have had to migrate, but now they don't need to migrate to be able to work remotely, because the whole world is now much more open to remote work. So you can imagine an engineer from Kenya working for Siemens in Germany, but without leaving the continent, or a designer in Ghana working for Zara in Spain, but they're doing it remotely. So you're going to start to see a lot of and I think this is actually quite an exciting opportunity for the world, because the world is aging. They need young talent. Where is that young talent? It's Africa. And that young talent now needs to be developed to be able to, work globally in roles like in data science and software engineering and, cybersecurity, all these things that the world needs a lot more of. We can produce that talent in Africa, and they can do remote work. So, these are some of the things that young people are seeing, and because we don't have the legacy of established systems like they exist in the rest of the world, we are going to really see some radical changes that are going to happen at primary school level, at secondary school level, and even at tertiary level, to really allow us to satisfy this need, because there's a lot of pressure from governments, from young people themselves for something different. And when there's pressure and there's incentives, this is in Africa, it's not just a nice to have to think about innovation. We have to think about innovation. We have no other choice because of all these massive pressures that exist. And so that's why I really believe that the great innovations in higher education in this century are going to be born in places like Latin America and Africa, and not necessarily in the rest of the world, because they have less incentive. I think some countries are definitely pushing the boundaries and trying to think differently. But for really where the greatest innovation is happening is in the outside of the government sector for now. So there's a lot of innovation that is happening, in leveraging technology to provide access to different forms of education. And as we think about where the disruptions are going to happen, like in most cases, disruption happens outside of the status quo, and then it eventually is adopted by the status quo. And it's because we don't have any legacy. Like in our case at the university, we didn't have professors on tenure. We don't have buildings that we have already built. We can completely reimagine and question everything. And that is the opportunity that we see in Africa today. I would say that the most important thing that I'm learning about education innovation is actually technology is not really the main barrier. It's not about just taking what you've done and putting it online. The biggest barrier to innovation in education is mindset, right? Because people, education has historically been one of the most conservative sectors in the world, and people like tradition. So you've got to be willing to break away from tradition. And so one of the things what I do when I start a new education institution, and I've started, about 6 of them, my founding team, I make sure that there's no one who has actually coming from a traditional school or even who has been, in education before, right? I find people who think very differently, and I put them into the team, and we start attacking the problem from first principles. And then later on, we bring the educators in, people who have experience, right? Because otherwise you don't question things. And so I think you need to create diverse teams that really bring people from outside of the sector. You need to be bold to challenge the status quo. You need to be willing to be misunderstood, and people will call you crazy. But that's what innovation is all about, and you need to also really think about innovating the pedagogy first before you apply technology to it. Because if you just take the traditional model and you try and put it online, then you are just making an inefficient and ineffective experience, and you're just putting it to maybe go a bit faster. So that's my advice, is really for people to resist going the ordinary path and really think much bigger, because the world needs unconventional thinking right now. We cannot do things the traditional way. And, in Africa and Latin America, we have no other choice. So let's get going.
Thank you so much, Fred, for your incredible insight. I must say, as a child of Africa, I'm always excited to hear about all the wonderful things that are happening in my beautiful continent. Thank you for painting a picture of what the future of education could look like and highlighting the learning opportunities that are available to young people in Africa. Let's head to the next session. I think we can all agree that 2020 has been one heck of a year for all of us. But can I just say hats off to all the teachers, parents, and students for how much you've had to adapt to education this year. And not just that, but doing it with so much passion and enthusiasm. And on that note, we actually want to highlight 3 examples from some of our innovators and some of the challenges they have experienced in the last year and how they've overcome them. To start us off, we're going to head over to India, the country that has personally brought me great joy when it comes, first of all, to food, and now education. We will hear from Sonal Kapoor, who is the founder of Protsahan India Foundation, and she will talk about empowering adolescent girls from underserved communities. Over to you.
Thank you, Romain, and thank you, HundrED. I think first up, I remember the last time we were at HundrED last year in Finland. And from there, that point in time to this point in time, a year later, a lot has happened. A lot has happened in terms of COVID. A lot has happened in terms of our understanding of growth of an organization. And I just want to take you through some of the core insights that we've had in the last 1 year. We were in a very critical stage. I still remember my conversation with Vishal Talreja from India at Finland, where we were talking about scale, what organization growth could look like for an organization like Protsahan. And we work with adolescent girls, right? And our focus before education, we have to take 5 steps backward, and we kind of, say that is the more basic stuff where the child is safe, is that taken care of at all or not? So during COVID, some very crazy questions and challenges came forth to us. Now, some of the reports, in fact, say that the child abuse cases increased by 106% during the first 3 months of the global lockdown that was happening in different countries at different points in time. In India alone, in about 11 days, the first 11 days of the nationwide lockdown, Childline 1098, the child helpline that takes the distress calls from children, in 11 days, about 92,000 distress calls happened, which was an increase by the same time, for the same number of calls, etc., the last year. So clearly there was a pandemic within the pandemic which was happening, which was more silent. And this being that of child abuse, this being that of the fact that our boys and girls, our children, were not safe. So we have to look at education not in a silo. And that has been one of our greatest understandings, that, when you're looking at education, let's not look at it as, hey, if it's going to be STEM or STEAM or, all of that is critical. There is no denying the fact. But can we also take 2 or 5 steps back and say, hey, is this child safe? Is this child learning in a safe space? Is this child learning in a space which is child friendly? Is this child, does she, when she goes back home, we've been handling cases where there've been massive number of incest cases. We've been handling cases where, so my understanding or our understanding here becomes of the fact that, hey, 6th and 7th and 8th grade in computer classes, all right, they are critical, but will she be molested by her father when she goes back home? So how much education would be relevant in a space like that, right? So safety has to be the first non-negotiable when you're looking at working with children. So the session says a success story. So let me just, quickly highlight 2-3 core points of our trajectory during COVID and now that we've kind of been on this journey that we've been on. So in the beginning of the lockdown, when the number of child abuse cases, now when I'm saying child abuse, I'm talking about child sexual abuse, which includes incest. I'm talking about child marriage cases where the number of child brides increased. I'm talking about child trafficking cases. I'm talking about physical abuse. I'm talking about the fact that the child had not eaten for 3 days. There were so many cases the children had not eaten their meals. So, when you're looking at abuse or child abuse, we look at it way more, than just child sexual abuse. It does, kind of create, it just makes you sort of, just stand up with danger and scare in your head. But it's also very important to understand that the trauma that the child is going through, irrespective of the fact whether it's a boy or a girl, the trauma that the child goes through is no less or more if it's trafficking versus child sexual abuse versus the fact that she's not eaten for days together, or the fact that, she'll end up as a child bride. So we look at trauma and how to address or deal with that trauma. So before COVID, we worked with we'd rescued about 928 girls, and we were working in very, very deep work, very, very deep healing work with all these girls and a few of our partners in collaboration. But when COVID happened, we also realized that India is a huge country, right? And we work out of Delhi, which is the capital of the country. Now, we cannot, say that, hey, if we are working in 39 slums in Delhi, that should be good enough. And that's our understanding of scale that gradually came forward. Now, what is scale in our context? Should we look at just the number line scale and say, hey, our budgets increased, so our scale increased, and hey, that's great for the growth of the organization? Or should we say, we came in where there was a danger of mission drift happening. There was a danger of, so we started getting into disaster relief for 3 months, because we also realized that if we don't feed our girls, there was no food available during the lockdown. The children we work with, like Romain was mentioning, they come from extremely underserved communities, right? So how do you work with a child on making sure that she's thriving when she doesn't even have the food on her plate to survive? So it was a clear, conversation and strategy that happened in the organization that said, hey, for 3 months, we only will be looking at survival of the kids. So if it means nutrition and food, we only have to do nutrition and food for the next 3 months. We also were very strategic and careful about the fact that we don't have to end up being a disaster relief organization for all our lives. But right now, that was core critical part of our work. During that work, we also, meanwhile, because I was saying that India is a huge country, and we have to make sure that, we were not only looking at our own girls at the organization, at Protsahan, about 1,000 girls, but we also had to look at the distress calls that were coming to the government, the distress calls that were coming to organizations or institutions like Childline or UNICEF India, right? And within 1 month of the lockdown happening, this beautiful partnership emerged where our insights of the last 10 years of working with some of the most girls coming from some of the most difficult circumstances of child rights violations and abuse, we took those insights, packaged it into a module. Now, I do understand that when you're creating a module, there's a lot of there's a lot of apprehension of the fact that there could be empty or hollow scale coming in. The quality of work that you've done as a direct intervention could be very different when you make a module out of it and expect your partners to apply or execute. So we were very, very careful on how we execute our entire heart approach. So how we work with a vulnerable child is basically something we call the heart way of doing things, where HEART is an acronym that stands for H for holistic healing, E for education, because that's a non-negotiable in any space for a child, A for art-based life skills, art and creativity-based life skills, R, which was very, very critical in our course of work of child rights abuse and violations, which stood for recovery from trauma, and T for technology-based trainings. Using this entire heart approach, we trained about 3,500 plus frontline workers at Childline, who further went on to work with about 1 lakh, which is about 1 lakh children, 100,000 children, right? In the context of, sorry, not 100,000, I think 1 lakh children that in India, with a very deep core focus of how do you work with a child who's dealing with abuse and distress in a time like COVID? How do you bring in the healing aspect in the work of a frontline worker? Very quickly with Childline, after Childline, UNICEF India partnership, and then Save the Children partnership happened. And then a lot of state governments started approaching us. Now, this was very unique for us, because I think as an organization last year, when we were speaking with Khatija and Pukhraj and Danny, we always said that we're a small organization and we want to do deep work, healing work, with a lot of care and empathy, but deep work. Not realizing that the deep work does not always have to be direct work. The best insights could come together, and now we realize that we actually ending up working with more than 300,000 children in the country, right? Just by training the frontline workers and social workers across the different organizations or state governments in India. One of the critical insights that came forward for us during this entire phase was that, rarely will opportunities be presented to you in the most perfect way, in nice little boxes with ribbons, as somebody says. Opportunities will not come like that. They'll be confusing, they'll be risky, they'll be hard to recognize, right? They will challenge you. And during COVID, our basic scale up phase of the organization started happening. Now, this was again something which was very organic for us. We were not looking at scale. We were not prepared for scale, if I'm like damn honest. But I think, so for an organization like us, with budgets of barely 30,000 USD, if I do an equivalent of Indian rupees to USD, with budgets of barely 30,000 USD pre-COVID, or I think just last year when we were at HundrED, to now our budgets are about 200,000 USD. right? Within a span of less than a year. And in the next 3 years, we're looking at a growth where our budgets will be about 800,000 USD a year, right? So and this is crazy for us as an organization who never prepared or planned or looked at scale this way. But the way organically we ended up achieving, because we kept the girl, the child, the adolescent girl at the center of all of our work, whether it was basic core survival, basic core healing, rescue work, and the work where we will enroll her in a school, etc. But the insights that came out, were something that we were able to share with the state departments, state governments of the in India, clearly giving us this little confidence that it's not always important that scale has to be either too deep or scale has to be completely number led, where you're doing, let's say, half an hour trainings with 20,000 children, so you say, hey, I've reached 20,000 children, but how impactful your work would be. And in our context, in different organizations, it could be absolutely relevant and different, but in our context, a lot of our work, like I said, healing will not come without true justice. If we say that, hey, I have to look at making sure that the
Thank
girls...
you so much, Sonal. So sorry to interrupt you, but we have to be moving forward just so
Absolutely.
we can make time for the other innovations.
Thank you. I lost track of time. Sorry.
No, but thank you very much, and thank you so much for your insights. Particularly appreciated how you're talking about the wellness of the entire child and how that actually is contributing to them thriving and not just focusing on the education aspect. But we will continue, and we are going to move over to Martin Bird. He's the founder and the CEO of Fundación Paraguaya, and he's representing the selected innovation self-sustaining agriculture school model. Over to you, Martin.
Hello, regards from Paraguay in South America. We are delighted to be with you here, and it's been pretty crazy. We have had a complete lockdown in the country since March. Thanks to that, we have had a relatively low number of infections and deaths compared to our neighbors in South America. And one reason is that Paraguay is a poor country, so I think we have 500 beds. So the only problem is that the government told everybody to stay at home. And this being a poor country, people were starving. So we had to reinvent ourselves. And one of the programs that we have at the Paraguay Foundation, in addition to our microfinance program and our youth entrepreneurship program, is our financially self-sufficient agricultural schools, where there are all the students in our high school were asked to stay in their homes, and but we had 40 salaries to pay. So it was a very big crisis. The school has a budget of about $600,000 a year, no government subsidies, completely financially self-sufficient, 40 salaries of teachers and staff. And so we had a very big crisis, and we said, oh my God, we're gonna bankrupt. But after a few days, we got together and we said, where is the opportunity in the problem? How are we going to make money with a problem? Where are we going to get the money to pay our 40 salaries? So the agricultural school that reinvented itself, and the teachers started milking the cows, watering the vegetable garden, taking care of the eucalyptus forestry project, taking care of the cheese factory. And up to now, we have generated some $300,000 this year in the most incredible way. So we are going to be a little bit more than 50% financially self-sufficient this year. Basically, what we did is that we said there are soup kitchens all over the country. Let us provide the products for the soup kitchen. So we served more than 2,000 soup kitchens all over the country. We developed a delivery system because there are no restaurants open. So we developed a system by way teachers would load the food kits in their homes, in their cars, and would develop the food to people's homes. We developed a gourmet club with the special products that we produce at the schools. And so in that way, we asked the teachers to reinvent themselves and move from just being a chemistry teacher or a geometry teacher or a veterinary science teacher or an agronomy teacher into actually producing in order to sell. And also our students reinvented themselves. We have a curriculum that is learning by doing, selling, and making money. So the students had to set up in their backyards or in a neighbor's farm, a vegetable garden, a chicken coop, a pig raising operation, a forestry operation, a cheese making operation. And they also started selling those products in order to support their families. So it was a win-win situation. Everybody became more versatile. Everybody became more adaptable. Everybody learned to listen to the market, to listen to consumers. What do consumers want? How can we satisfy that need? And then we started working with our students' parents in creating village banks, microfinance opportunities, and we also developed micro franchises. So it was it has been a very difficult year, but the COVID crisis has forced us to reinvent ourselves. And with that, we are developing a pilot program for our education stoplight initiative that allows teachers, parents, and students to analyze their strengths and to identify their weaknesses and start making individualized plans to overcome their weaknesses. So thank you, HundrED, for this opportunity to allow us to share with you that I think even though we're a little bit bruised, we're going to come out a little bit better after this crisis. And I look forward to continuing listening to all the speakers. HundrED is a fabulous organization that allows us to showcase our challenges, our difficulties, but also our successes. So Lasse, thank you very much for this opportunity, and we will continue listening with great interest to this wonderful, wonderful seminar.
Oh, Martin, you make us feel so good about ourselves. No, thank you. We love the work that you're doing, and just the learning by doing model that we have there is fantastic and something that I definitely would have appreciated back in school. If you are actually interested in other sustaining education models, I recommend that you have a look at Little Ripples from Chad and Sistema Global from Venezuela. But now we will move over to Colombia. Juan Manuel Lopero, who is the founder and CEO of Tommy Digital. And through their digital device, they deliver teaching resources to communities without internet access. Over to you.
Thank you so much, everybody. And good morning from Colombia. Good afternoon there in Helsinki. And in the next 5 minutes, I will tell you how I went from a violent and poor neighborhood to create a patented technology that is already changing the lives of thousands of teachers around the world. My city in Colombia, Medellin, is one of the most innovative cities in the world today. However, it was the most violent city during the 90s. And this, in the first slide, this is me growing in a violent neighborhood in the most violent city in the world. Just to give you an idea about what that means, before I was 10 years old, my grandpa, auntie, cousin, godfather, teachers, and some friends were killed. I was not sad, I was angry. In my mind, I was only dreaming about the day when I will get revenge or vengeance. The chance for me to be a good guy was almost none. However, that was the moment when my superhero appeared in my life, my math and science teacher, Sigifredo Cortés. No matter if the school could pay to him or not, my teacher spent tens of hours per week after school motivating us to believe in ourselves, to find a better way to live and than just following the same path of violence and drugs that most of our friends already followed. When I finished my high school, I didn't have the money to go to the university. However, I had the motivation to create my first software company, and I sold it 3 years later. In that moment, with 19 years old, I had in my pocket the equivalent of 200 years of salary of my parents. But also, I had the gratefulness to my teacher, and I had the motivation to work for teachers in my entire life. I decided to expend my days, my money, creating something to support millions of teachers to replicate my own story millions of times. After that, my co-founder and I were traveling around the world to understand the gap between developed and developing countries' education. We realized how challenging it is for you, the teachers, to motivate their students today. Mostly in those classrooms where the internet is not available, where contents are not interactive and teacher salaries are under $250 per month. Slide 2, please. Thank you. In that slide, you see what we finally created. After almost 10 years working among dozens of teachers around the world, we created TommyDigital.com. This is an online content creation platform with two superpowers for any teachers in the developing world. The first superpower is that Tommy device simulates internet access inside a classroom, so students can connect to a free Wi-Fi network to have full didactic experience, even inside those 65 million classrooms in the world that don't have internet access yet. And the second superpower is that Tommy is learning continuously from better teachers around the world to guide those other teachers that are just starting innovating with technology in education. So this is gonna be better and easier for those new teachers in innovation. To give you a better idea about how Tommy works, Tommy is like Kahoot.com. You can just go register and start creating your interactive, awesome classes for free using videos, hypertext, images, and interactive group games using a very simple templates. And the better part is here in the third slide. You will see how you deploy the classes in the field. To teach your classes, you can ask your students to go online with the code of the class, like exactly how you do with Kahoot, for example. However, what happened if the question is, what happened if there is not internet access in the classroom, or what happened if the students are in their rural areas during the pandemic without internet access in their homes? That's the moment where our free device makes the magic. As you can see in the picture again, in the slide, the teacher in the left has only a backpack with a very small battery bank and a Tommy device that creates a Wi-Fi connection where students can be connected to. The teachers deploys the games and pick up the metrics of the experience of each one of the students automatically, like being connected to a broadband. Tommy will learn from each class interaction to guide teachers in their next class creation. Until today, more than 10,000 teachers are using Tommy online and offline, as you see in the picture. And we expected that in the next 3 years, over 8 million students will get inspired with classes created in Tommy tools. So in this final slide, and just for closing, if you are a teacher in a developed country, please use TommyDigital.com in your classes. You will create awesome classes for your students, but also if you decided so, you will contribute to millions of teachers in emerging countries with your public classes. And if you are in an emerging country, even if you don't have internet access, use tommydigital.com. It was tough, especially for you. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Juan, for sharing your work with us. It's really great to hear from our innovators and all the incredible work that they're doing all over the world. If you want to learn more about the innovations from the 2021 Global Collection, visit the Identify platform and explore the innovation pitches under HundrED 2021, where they're highlighting their work, sharing their impact, and their response to COVID-19. Actually, let's head to one video now.
Hello, hi. My name is Doreen Godliving Kesi, and I'm the Chief Business Officer at Ubongo in Tanzania. There's an education crisis in Africa, and most of the 500 million kids on the continent stand to miss out on the life-changing opportunity of a quality education. The problem starts at the earliest years, with 44% of children ages 3 to 4 experiencing low cognitive or socio-emotional development. They enter school with insufficient learning readiness, and then the problem just compounds from there. In Tanzania, 55% of 10 to 16-year-olds fail a baseline math and reading test set for an 8-year-old. And over half of primary school students do not own a single textbook. Schools are overcrowded, teachers are undertrained, and the system is rotten rigid, leaving kids discouraged and unmotivated to learn. School systems are unable to meet the demand, and families have little access to informal learning resources outside of school. Almost half of Africa's population are children, and 2 billion more will be born over the next 35 years. We need solutions that can help fill this gap at low cost and massive scale to help Africa's next generation realize their potential. Our motto at Ubongo combines the power of entertainment and the proven efficacy of research-based and localized learning and the reach of mass media to deliver effective learning for kids across the continent. So we leverage accessible technologies that families already have, such as TV, radio, and mobile phones, to bring them top quality learning. And we do this through the universal language, childhood language of cartoons, music, fun, and play. So we produce 2 shows which are animated and fun and educational. Akili and Me teaches ages 3 to 6, early literacy, numeracy, social-emotional learning, and English as a second language. And then Ubongo Kids teaches math, science, technology, and engineering to 7 to 14-year-olds. Our vision is to equip Africa's next generation with the educational foundation, critical skills, and positive mindsets to change their lives, but also communities for the better. We want to transform learning for all 500 million kids across the continent. Our business model is a hybrid one, which is a combination of grants, but also earned revenue. We work with international development partners to co-produce content, and we have them subsidize the cost of that, but also we have merchandise and things like that. So B2C, but also B2C sales, and then we have B2B sales, and we also work with sponsors and advertisers. Over 17 million families across the continent learn with our educational cartoons through radio and TV weekly, and we broadcast in 31 countries across the continent in 4 languages. We've also conducted research, an impact evaluation study that has shown that kids who watch our educartoon, Akili and Me, have 12% higher cognitive development scores than those who don't watch. And kids who watch Ubongo Kids improve significantly in math scores. In Tanzania, 99% of parents say that their children's quality of life has improved because of our content. During the pandemic and during the lockdowns across the world, a lot of schools also in Africa closed and shut down, and we saw an increased demand for our content, but also we saw the increase in diversity of needs, and we wanted to make sure that families have access to the information and knowledge that they need. And so we immediately made all our content accessible for free to all kids and to any organization and anyone who would take it and distribute it to kids, and we put it under Creative Commons license. But also we went on to create public service announcements with specific health messages around health, hand washing and hygiene, to ensure that kids and their families are protected and know what to do during this time. In the meantime, we continue to pursue relationships with governments, such as ministries of education, as well as multilateral organizations such as UNICEF and WHO, to really support them with content development, but also content distribution across the continent. So join us as we work hard to ensure that millions of kids across the continent, regardless of their background or where they're from, have access to top quality learning. Thank you.
Really great to hear all the work that Ubongo is doing. And once again, there is plenty where that came from. So I do encourage you to explore all those innovations. It's really inspiring, the work that is taking place all over the world. And now we're going to hear from experts in South America, India, and the World Bank. They will dive a little bit deeper into some of the challenges within their context, as well as offer insights on how to make change happen no matter what. This session is going to be hosted by Vishal Talreya, who is the co-founder of Dream a Dream and will lead us in this discussion. Vishal actually won Innovator of the Year last year, and this was for his innovation, Dream a Dream. And their work is with young people from vulnerable backgrounds who are working to overcome adversity. Over to you, Vishal.
Thank you, Romain. It is always an honor and pleasure to be part of the 100 Innovation Summit. I had the good fortune to attend the summit in person last year. And while we can't be there today, this time around, we are glad that we are able to still connect and share in the joy of recognizing 100 global innovations in education. Also, thank you to the previous speakers and innovators who have spoken about their innovations, which is setting the tone for this very exciting panel. I have 4 very interesting people joining me on this panel. We have Cristobal Cobo, who's an education specialist, a senior education specialist at the World Bank. We have Christina Lowery, who's the CEO at Girl Rising. We have Laura Diaz-Zia, who's an education and financial literacy head at Ban Colombia. And we have Hilarme Sinitra, who's the executive director at Eleva Next. What we're going to explore further, in addition to everything that the speakers have said earlier, is certain innovations and opportunities that come from challenging environments. And then the question that we're exploring is, what if quality education comes from the most challenging environments around the globe? If I look at our own example in India, and we heard Sonal speak a bit about some of the challenges India has faced through the pandemic. What we have seen in India in terms of education innovations at scale in the complex demography of India has been quite fascinating. We have seen education being delivered through loudspeakers, in vans, traveling around neighborhoods, and teachers teaching using loudspeakers with social distancing norms. There's been use of community radio. Schools have set up peer community groups where older young people living in those communities have set up groups to teach younger children. We've had parents taking on a much more intentional and active role in learning. We've had governments who have set up IVRS systems where parents can call in and give a missed call and then they get a call back with a lesson plan. And they can sit around with their children or with children in the community at home and run through the lesson plan. We have seen disruption happen, but we've also seen innovation happen. And our attempt today is to continue to explore this. So I'm going to first invite Cristobal Cobo. From your lens, working at the World Bank, what are some of the challenges and opportunities and innovations you have come across? And what really have been some of your insights as we are exploring education in this new environment? Cristobal, over to you.
Thank you very much, Pichal. Thank you to Danny and to all the 100 team for this amazing World Cup of education in which we are all winners. It's such an inspiring moment. Let me start saying that in the times of COVID, we have learned that we are facing a twin crisis: school closure and economic recession. On the one side, before the pandemic, we already had what the World Bank calls the learning poverty. 50% of 10 years old kids from low and middle income countries cannot read and understand a simple text. Now, in addition, we encountered that the learning loss that this pandemic is bringing is particularly threatening the most vulnerable. We have learned that if appropriate support is not provided, this health crisis can have long-term implications in our society, expanding existing inequalities and expanding as well the divide between urban and rural, between those who have access and those without, between those kids who receive support at home and those who don't. But you know what? It doesn't have to be that way. The pandemic has made more and more evident the importance of reducing the existing digital divide. It is quite clear that the digital divide hits countries in very different ways. In some cases, the main gap is on access to electricity, connectivity, and devices, while in other cases, this digital divide affects access to high-quality contents, appropriate teacher training, or effective pedagogies for teaching remotely. I think today it's time to rethink how technologies can support learning. Therefore, it will be critical to have a broader understanding of this idea of digital ecosystem, which also include low-tech solutions like radio and television. Technology alone won't make any difference if schools don't have the digital infrastructure, meaning connection, electricity, devices, and contents, human infrastructure, meaning training and support, and logistics, securing funding, monitoring, technical assistance. We have learned these days how important is the school as a social institution, as a critical space where students not only have access to educational resources, but where they develop social skills and fundamental values for living in society. We have learned that today that learning is not only a transactional practice, but it's a relational one, not limited to only delivering contents, but when there is a space for connecting, for feedback, for guidance, for support, and also for having fun. At the same time, what we have seen is that learning can happen anytime and anywhere when basic access to educational resources and the required support that either teachers or parents can provide. There's a necessity to invest more wisely and better, designing strategies for recovery plans, as well as for remedial education practices to support those who might be left behind. However, if we really want to make a difference, and let me emphasize this, if we really want to make a difference, it probably won't be because we simply manage to get back to business as usual, but how we take advantage of this opportunity to rethink the schools, not as a place, but as an experience that goes beyond the classroom. This is also an unprecedented opportunity to rethink educational systems, reimagine the learning organizations, empower the role of teachers, our superheroes, and perhaps reimagine what it means to learn. Let me finish saying this. Despite the challenges that we have previously mentioned, it is also true that we have seen a wealth of experiences that are becoming a garden of innovations that are blooming everywhere in the world. And today, more than ever, education systems are called to become learning organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. I think you've laid out the challenge and the opportunity that we're sitting on. And I love the way you framed it. One is opening up the understanding of digital infrastructure, expanding that, asking us to reflect on what is learning and looking at learning as a relational concept, looking at learning as an anytime, anywhere concept. and also focusing on recovery versus remedial. And you've really kind of opened it up from that lens. And as I go to the next speaker, as I invite Christina, I want to probably focus on one critical aspect of the challenge and how, Christina, you have seen it being addressed, is girls' education, or now the impact of this pandemic on girls' education. In India, we are already seeing, for example, where families, because of the economic crisis, have lost their livelihoods and incomes. They're deprioritizing girls' education. In many households, we're beginning to see girls are beginning to take on more household roles, more adult roles. And of course, as Sonal spoke about, the increase in abuse and violence and neglect that is happening, which I also can hazard that it's probably happening more with young women and girls. So Christina, maybe you could throw some reflection on the impact on girls and young women, and what are the innovations and opportunities you see happening? You're muted there, Christina.
Thank you. Absolutely, and thank you so much. Thank you, Cristobal. I'm going to pick up on many of the themes you touched on, and I have to say I love the last phrase you mentioned, a garden of innovation that's blooming. That's a good image to hold on to. So first, a bit about Girl Rising. Girl Rising is an international nonprofit whose mission is to use the power of storytelling to change the way the world values girls and their education. We're currently working in 11 countries with over 120 local partners who work with adolescent girls and boys, mostly in school settings, but also in out-of-school contexts. And our work with them involves adapting the Girl Rising curriculum, a story-based curriculum designed to help develop voice and agency and confidence in girls, build social emotional skills and self-awareness for both girls and boys, and critically to help both girls and boys explore and challenge the harmful social norms that narrowly dictate what girls and boys can be. So what is the situation for girls? Even before COVID-19 struck, more than 129 million school-age girls worldwide were not in school, according to UNESCO. And now, due to ripple effects from the pandemic, some predict that an additional 12 million girls who were in classrooms last March will never return to the classroom. So there already was an education crisis for girls, and now the crisis has gotten worse. And like you just said, being at home, out of school, with the stresses of economic hardships that so many families are facing, it means girls are experiencing increased physical and sexual violence, increased early and forced marriage, unintended pregnancies, and shouldering an unequal burden of domestic responsibilities and adult roles. And though going digital seems the natural way forward in education, the truth is that this may be deepening and compounding inequality and the digital divide. So for a bit more context, and I know my colleagues here have mentioned about technology. The reality is girls and women do not have equal access to technology in many countries. So technology-based solutions, though promising for many, are compounding this inequality. And I'll stick with the example of India. A few numbers. In 2017, out of a population of 350 million Indians who have access to the internet, merely 29% are women. And the OECD in 2018 reported that 12% of women in India do not use the internet owing to negative social perception associated with its use. And that less than 30% own a mobile phone. So the innovations I want to point out today, because I also think that we're seeing a garden of innovation blooming around the world, especially at the community level, are all about serving the population of girls that either have no access to technology or only to what's considered low-end technology. All of these come from our work with our community-based partners who are working both in urban and in rural settings. So the first is innovation on how to deliver content and connect with girls. The second is the innovation in the intentional inclusion of parents and families in that delivery of content and programming. And the third is the content itself that prioritizes social emotional well-being, inspiration, and awareness about discriminatory gender norms and resilience. All of the above are scalable and informative, I think, to the wider education sector. So in terms of the how, the methods of engaging girls, in India, for example, we collaborated with our partner Slam Out Loud to redesign art-based social emotional activities to be accessed by low-tech devices like simple flip phones and delivered over WhatsApp and also using interactive voice recording, as you mentioned. These have been adopted by multiple state governments, and as a result, over 4 million kids, typically in government schools, are receiving these activities regularly, mostly on their parents' phone. In Guatemala, we worked with local partners to turn the Girl Rising curriculum into a radio program, reaching girls in rural areas who have no chance of connecting with learning via technology. And we combined those radio programs with printed material that was also delivered to the homes of these girls. And in Kenya, we collaborated to create also printed at-home learning guides delivered to 20,000 families in the informal settlements of Kibera. So what's innovative about these is the utilization of older technology, as others have already said, and that all of them are not just reaching girls, but really importantly, engaging their parents and their families in their learning. The other critical innovation, as I mentioned, is around the content itself. The reality of why so many girls do not persist in school and do not graduate from secondary school is multi-layered, of course. But one of the biggest barriers are the social norms and expectations of what a girl can be and do. And I want to share with you a very short excerpt from a poem that I think beautifully illustrates what these norms are for adolescent girls. It was written by Ehi Ogwiji from Nigeria. She recently won a storytelling challenge that we conducted. And here's what she wrote. Why is girlhood designed like an internship program for marriage? Why is the news of the arrival of a man's fourth girl child passed quietly like an internal memo written on the midwife's lips and signed by his wife's sigh? So the innovation that we are focused on at Girl Rising is using the power of storytelling to change this, to work hand in hand with local partners to change these internal memos about the way societies value girls and their futures. So through powerful and intimate stories about real girls, through media campaigns and educational tools and on-the-ground programs and partnerships, we're working to change the attitudes and harmful norms that narrowly dictate what a girl and woman can do and be. And we help build the skills and mindsets of girls so that they can pursue futures of their choosing. This kind of learning, building confidence, voice, agency, joy, as someone also mentioned, joy of learning, self-awareness, and positive gender attitudes is now being recognized by more and more governments at this time as critical components of quality education and not just nice to haves. So this is our innovation. To change the future for girls, we must change the story. We must reach not only girls and give them the skills and develop the mindsets for them to stay in school, but we also must reach those around her parents, her brothers, her teachers, and her community leaders to build a community of support. Because we need these girls. We need their contributions, their talents, and their ideas. So I'll stop here.
Thank you, Christina. We are running a bit under time, so I'll quickly go to the next speaker, Laura. Laura, one of the things I think might be interesting for you to explore is the urban-rural challenge and how that has played out in the pandemic and what are some of the innovations that you have done or experienced in communities. So Laura, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Vishal, and thank you everyone at HundrED and everyone watching us right now. I'm actually very glad that Christina mentioned rural girls and what's happening in rural areas, and I take that together with what Cristobal mentioned and focus on, how that gap is just growing because of COVID. There's not that much connectivity. Bancolombia Foundation works right now only in Colombia with our education strategy. And what we've been focusing on is rural areas because the gap there was already pretty wide. But with COVID, it has exacerbated. So what we've been trying to do is, if we don't have the connectivity infrastructure, and it requires a large investment, not just from the government, but also private sector to make it happen, we decided to knock on some doors and try to find some partners to help us with this. I'll give you an example with one of our literacy programs. It was made to happen in person. And we couldn't do that because of COVID. So we actually called Juan Manuel, the speaker we saw a little while ago from Tommy. And I asked Juan Manuel, hey, how can we take our program to these rural schools that don't have any connectivity whatsoever, but also help in the training of the teachers into their digital skills? Because rural teachers don't have that much access to training here in Colombia because of how remote they are. And actually right now, 20 of our schools are being delivered their own TOMI with some curriculum that is already uploaded into the TOMI. And actually we're taking it to indigenous rural schools that don't have any access whatsoever to internet, but that they will have everything they need in that TOMI right there. So you can innovate with just, bringing this small pieces of technology that already have the training for the teachers at school. And that takes me to my second point, the skill building that needs to happen. And that's part of the gap that we're seeing with rural areas and urban areas right now. And skill building needs the teachers to be trained first so that they actually can deliver this to the kids. And with this, we actually work also with another HundrED innovator, which is CoSchool. And they've helped us build this program for social and emotional skills that can be taken to teachers, but also to students. And we actually do it through WhatsApp, because that's another tool that we found out that we can use during these times, and because we're involving parents. And I like the fact that Christina mentioned, that you need to do an intentional inclusion of parents in what you're doing. And since the parents are the owners of the phones, we do activities that involve the parents. They make it easier for them to do the homeschooling, because that's what's happening right now. Teachers are sending messages through WhatsApp, but the parents are the ones that have to make it happen at home. And they don't have any idea how to do it well, and they're getting frustrated. So what we're trying to do with partners like CoSchool, and also partners like Red Golipaz, which is our operator for soccer-themed skill building programs, we are involving parents. We're working through WhatsApp. We're sending videos. We are also doing radio shows. Actually, just yesterday, they were telling me that they actually took a van with a speaker in the back with the radio program, because that specific community couldn't get access to radio where we needed it. So yes, we're called to innovate in how we're operating, but just as the last point, because Cristóbal also mentioned funding, and we are changing things in funding as well here at PanColombia Foundation, because we're joining other partners like Canada and the Ministry of Education in creating a results-based fund. And that actually makes a change in how social programs are operated in Colombia. Mostly we were based on traditional philanthropy. You have $100, you donate $100, and a foundation uses them in a social program. But right now, we're changing that. We're joining trends all around the world that have impact funds that are doing impact investment. So now we have this results-based fund. And what we're trying to do is that, yes, we're going to pay for the cost of implementation, but we're going to give a premium for the results you're obtaining, because we want results. We don't want just to look good, because we're a corporate foundation. People may think, well, they're just doing that to look good, but not quite. We want changes, and we want systemic change. That's what we're trying to drive. So those are the three things I wanted to share with you guys. Also, use the HundrED community. They were so helpful during this time for us, honestly. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. What I'm taking away is intentional inclusion of parents, innovative ways to fundraise, and partnering with the right kind of partners. So I want to move to Guilherme. You have spoken about tools that you have developed for teachers and school leaders and the larger community. I think that's a very important concept to talk into. So over to you. You're muted.
Great. So thanks very much. Before anything, I'm sorry if there is any noise here. It's a bit hectic. I'm just in the middle of a moving. But what I'd like to say and talk to you about is actually what Laura has said, which is the way you should get all the community together to actually like make any changes in terms of innovation. It's not only going into only to the kids, but all the stakeholders should be part of it. So I worked as an investment funds focused on impact in education. I worked as a teacher for public and private schools. I worked as a product owner, and nowadays I had this innovation strategy. And that made sure that I could understand a little bit about the EdTech context and to understand something that is very simple and very complex at the same time, which is the tools that we have for education are not the best ones, are not the most advanced in terms of technology, but the most ancient ones. What I always say to the people that work with me is that our main focus when we talk about EdTech is actually making sure people have great conversations. This is the most important technology that we might be able to use. And that made sure, when Christina talked about storytelling, that's something that really connects with me, because what I always say is that if we really want to use data as a meaningful manner, is not only about connectivity, but also about data literacy. And data literacy is something that we're working on to make sure that school principals can understand, and school teachers, and actually like their students themselves and parents. And what we do with that is that we always tell people data tells a story. And so I always say, I always look at people using data in a very complex manner. What I always try to do with my team is making sure the user experience is an experience where a teacher can actually like look at a table of content and in 2 minutes can use what they know about the students in the context together with the data to actually like make sure they have great conversation with the kids, to make sure that the kids have what they need to actually like be learning. What makes sure that we can actually like try that and use that is that where you have one of the main, with the most exciting labs in the world when you talk about education. We have a network of schools that have about 80,000 kids right now in really different contexts in Brazil. We have people in big cities, but we also have people that are in like the borders of Paraguay, from really low income class students to really high end students. And what is really clear whenever we talk about innovation is that context matters. And because of that, if we don't empower people to actually understand the stories of each and every one of the students, we will not be able to actually leverage on the data in a meaningful and effective manner. We will always be able to diagnose things, but how can we actually act on that? And so with that, we have all the systems that we have, they are really connected, and the data is connected throughout all the schools. And that makes sure that we can actually like use this data to have value added to the universities that help us to understand the gaps that we have and to build technology to actually act on that. So one of the examples we just did this research with a foundation that showed that in our schools, and that's not probably something that happens only in our schools, the students are being, having their grades being lower or higher based on their behavior. And that's something we actually were able to show that we also have some biases against Black boys. And that's something really important to understand when you look at the context. Of course, this is probably not some biases that are conscious, but we have to understand that so we can actually like have the great conversations that are needed for teachers to understand what is needed for the students to thrive, and to understand that maybe we're doing something that's not the most appropriate when we talk about the quality of education and the context that we are building. And so what we want to build in the future was what we call an adaptive school. So of course, it's a little joke with adaptive platforms. Adaptive platforms are really interesting and really important, but they're not enough. When we talk about stakeholders in the school and the engagement with the community, adaptive platforms are one of these things. The school has to be adaptive, and to be able to have adaptive schools that are context-based, we actually have to have data flowing through the people in ways people can actually understand it, tell a story about the students, connect with one another. And in a context where we have in Brazil a very difficult career path to teachers, where they probably are going to 5 or 6 different schools, if we don't have the data to connect to people in the best conversation possible, we are not able to build on that, on their knowledge and their understanding of each one of the kids, together with data that, of course, nobody is able to gather in their own heads, to have the best conversations possible, to actually leverage on adaptive schools to build the community that are needed for each one of the students that we have. What we really want to be able to build, and it's going to be great to talk to you afterwards, Christina, Laura, Cristobal, Vishal, is how can we actually leverage on that to take that to really different contexts and make sure conversations are building in ways that are meaningful to each and every one of the students. We're beginning in a lab, what I say, which is like a private school system with 80,000 kids with a very specific context, but in Brazil. But we want to be able to make sure that we understand the meaningful talks and conversation that happen each and every one of the days that we are building the skill community. And it's going to be great to talk to you about how that can be done in context as the rural ecosystems or Colombia or different contexts that we might be facing, and to collaborate on that. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and let's have another great conversation right now, which is pretty important for us.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, so we won't have time to take any questions. But what I am taking away is there is a garden of global innovations out there. We need to be changing narratives around girls and girls' education. We need to have an intentional inclusion of parents. We need to focus on partnerships and collective action. And content matters, and we need to look at adaptive schools and great conversations. So thank you again for this rich conversation. I'm going to hand it over to Romain to take it forward from here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Vishal, and all our panelists for such a great discussion. Last, but certainly not least, I have the pleasure of introducing Vicky Colbert, who has served as the Vice Minister of Education in Colombia. She is best known as the founder and executive director of Fundación Escuela Nueva. Vicky is also the co-author of the renowned Escuela Nueva model, which has become an internationally acclaimed teaching model. She's the winner of the Wise Prize and the Yidan Prize of Education. We're truly excited to hear from Vicky as she talks about creating such a great school and such a popular school that has actually been adopted in over 20 countries. Vicky, over to you.
See me? Hello, do you see me?
Okay, well, listen, if we don't have any technical interruptions, this would not be 2020. So while I have you here, I would love you to jump over into the chat and have a talk with us. Tell us which of the sessions have really touched you and inspired you the most. And now we're ready. Vicky, once again, over to you.
Could I just want to go back to my first, slide, because they changed it. So I just want to go to the first one, if that's okay. Because I don't have access to writing you.
Vicky, you're good to go.
Yes. Okay, now I hear you. Can you change back? Can you put back my first? Okay, perfect. Okay, do you hear me now? Hear me?
Yes, Vicky, we can hear you.
Okay, can I start now? Perfect. Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be with all of you here, especially I'm at the other side of the world in Colombia, South America. I want to share briefly the story of Escuela Nueva, which means new school, quality education for equity, peace, and citizenship. I mainly want to share some images. So first of all, I want to share what is this innovation about. I want to highlight, it's one of the longest bottom-up innovations of the developing world that's still being sustained. And I think this is important to highlight. We started as a local innovation, gradually became a national policy, mainly in the remote rural multi-grade schools, because we were, as all the rest of Latin America, we were looking to promote full access, because many of these schools, which were multi-grade, required a lot of innovation. And I always say necessity is the mother of innovation, and Escuela Nueva is a little bit the story of Cinderella, because we started with those invisible, the most remote schools in Colombia, and gradually it has become an example of a school of tomorrow. This is why it's a bit the story of Cinderella. And we had to transform all this complexity into simple, manageable action so that any teacher could have results. So what is the innovation about? First of all, in these rural isolated schools where children in the same grade are different learning rhythms, different grades in the same classroom with one teacher, we thought that we needed a paradigm shift, that improving the quality of education was more than emphasis just of expanding the actual system. So more of the same was not enough. So we had to shift from transmission of information to an emphasis in comprehension and construction of knowledge, social construction of knowledge. And we needed a new approach to learning, renovated teaching methods, and a change in the role of the teacher. So from the outset, we had to think systemically. We wanted to have a child with more improved academic skills, self-esteem, which we've been measuring so many, many years, social skills and democratic behavior. We wanted to improve teachers' practices, and especially a positive attitude, peer support among themselves. We wanted the active involvement of parents and communities. And of course, we want to change the role of the administrator. So we had to think systemically from the outset. But of course, the center was really child-centered. We really wanted to emphasize child-centered learning and change the focus of teacher-centered to child-centered. Nothing new in the philosophy of education. We have known this for more than 100 years. It's what all the great education thinkers thought about at the beginning of the century. Unfortunately, these ideas came mainly to some of the elite schools in Colombia and in Latin America, but not to the most vulnerable schools. So we really wanted to impact national curriculum policy, national training policies, and textbook policies. So we had to rethink the classroom, the way of learning, and the whole system. So Escuela Nueva transforms the conventional school and the way of learning from teacher-centered to really child-centered, participatory, self-paced learning and cooperative learning, because children learn through dialogue and interaction. So these are just some of the images, children working in small groups. So what does Escuela Nueva promote? Child-centered, active, participatory, and cooperative learning. Different learning paces in the classroom. Not all children are doing the same thing at the same time, because we had to modularize the curriculum and incorporate self-paced learning guides. And of course, and the new role of the teacher as a mentor, as a facilitator and an orientator, not a transmitter of information. Now, we work in remote rural areas where there's no connectivity. So our printed learning guides that have not only content but pedagogical sequence are extremely crucial. And we also wanted to bring the parents in the learning process. These are rural community parents, and we wanted to make them participants of the learning process of their children. So we had to change the way of doing the teacher training. We wanted teachers to be exposed with the same experiential methodologies they would use with their students. We wanted to emphasize what Dewey said 100 years ago, nurturing democratic and participatory values and active citizenship. So children have school governments, they have their own committees, they run the administration, they have their committees, and they work all together. And I think this is crucial because it's a lot of teamwork. And these are, of course, are self-paced, self-directed, reusable, because we had to think of cost effectiveness, learning guides that incorporate both content and methodology. They're flexible and they promote independent learning and cooperative work, and they can be adapted locally. They can be produced at a national level, but can be adapted locally by the teacher. So children are working permanently through dialogue and pairs, interaction, individual work, collaborative and group work, promoting interaction and relevance of curriculum, children's learning corners, what Maria Montessori used to do with the elite schools in Italy years back. Nothing of the ideas are new. We just learned to implement them in a very, we had to transform all this complexity into simple, manageable action. Children have to walk far away from their homes to reach the school. So examples like community maps that are very helpful for teachers so they can see who's the child that has to walk the longest. So this is very important. We have many concrete instruments. And of course, a new culture of peace, citizenship, and especially allowing boys and girls to learn, empowering them in their communities. So there have been decades of research behind demonstrating access, improvement in quality, improvement in equality, because especially we want to reduce inequity. And of course, we wanted to develop the concept of social skills, have results in academic achievements and pluralism. There have been decades of research behind demonstrating how these schools, when it's well implemented, have an impact on improving not only achievement, but peaceful democratic behavior. Evaluations, UNESCO, University of London, Stanford University, my own alma mater, the World Bank, National Planning Department of Colombia, research institutes here in Colombia. There have been decades of research. And it is possible. Yes, we can improve citizenship building, and of course, peaceful social interactions can be nurtured at school. Bullying is totally reduced. So the way we learn influences development of our social interactions. This is a research study on democratic behavior that was published in the University of London. And girls' participation, especially girls' self-esteem and leadership skills, are enhanced because we know cooperative learning is central to Escuela Nueva, which contributes to eliminate prejudice, stereotypes, and gender biases. So some important conclusions. The World Bank selected it years back as one of the 3 outstanding reforms in countries that had impacted successfully national policies. The United Nations Development Report selected it as one of the 3 achievements of the country. And I think this last research on socioeconomic levels is very important because Escuela Nueva compensates for socioeconomic limitations when comparing with children of higher socioeconomic levels. So it's the issue of reducing inequality. And of course, here are more studies, more recent studies. But all these are important because it just demonstrates that there has been a lot of research behind Escuela Nueva. So we have impacted more than 7 million children around the world, mainly through governments. This is important to highlight, not us directly. We have worked with governments. Now, innovations are very vulnerable to political and administrative changes. This is one of the issues. However, I want to highlight the importance of Vietnam, because the Vietnamese wanted the Colombian Escuela Nueva in the whole Vietnam, and we gave them technical assistance. We sent Colombian teachers to Vietnam, and they took the political decision, and they reached all the rural multi-grade schools in Vietnam. This is very important because it's a country that took the political decision and took it to scale, and with a good evaluation behind from the World Bank. Now, Escuela Nueva Foundation, it's an NGO. Once we have impacted national policy, once you scale up, then you have to scale down. We had to create our small NGO, Fundación Escuela Nueva, because we wanted to continue innovating. We wanted to adapt it to urban schools, to vulnerable urban schools. We wanted to adapt it to migrant children through Escuela Nueva learning circles. These are for displaced and migrant children. At the moment, we are working a lot with Venezuelan children that permanently are coming to Colombia. We have more than 2 million migrants in Colombia. We have furthered our conceptualization on cooperative learning, on peace education, on entrepreneurship, and of course, now we have an online campus and a community of practice called Nueva, and we're training online teachers in Colombia, which has been a tremendous challenge for us, but we're doing it. We are training 1,000 teachers virtually, and 7,000 appeared, were registered. They wanted to be trained. I wanted to highlight this that I saw in the newspaper so many years back in the Colombian newspaper. We have the ability to solve problems, follow instructions, lead processes, meet deadlines, but most important, work in groups. If you have yes, you have a greater chance of getting a job. And this is exactly what are the 21st century skills promoting nowadays. Learning to learn, learning to criticize and accept criticism, to follow instructions, meet deadlines, critical thinking, taking on complex problems, learning to lead processes and take initiatives, especially through the school governments. It's amazing. Children learn to take risks, to communicate ideas. This is our challenge. In Latin America and in Colombia, we don't have connectivity in the rural areas. The teachers are learning how to use them now through our resource community of practice, Nueva, learning how to synthesize, to test knowledge. I think the most important of all of the 21st century skills that we're working on is the ability to work in teams. So this is what I wanted to highlight. This is exactly the same, a more explicit development of 21st century skills in the ways of thinking, in the ways of living in the world, in the ways of working, and of course, tools for working now. That's basically what I was reading before. So as a conclusion, yes, it is possible to improve the quality of education and learning. More of the same is not enough. It requires a paradigm shift from teacher-centered to really child-centered. We need to think systemically from the outset. Learning has to go beyond academic achievements. We've been doing this for ages, and we've been measuring social emotional competencies and self-esteem of children. Technology can trigger change, but you need a new pedagogy. It's indispensable for effective learning. Just introducing computers in the classroom without changing your pedagogics can perpetuate at a higher cost the traditional technique. So, and we're working at the moment in remote areas where there's no technology and no connectivity. So children have been so accustomed to autonomous learning and following their learning guides, and the new role of the teacher is really taking shape now after the COVID, because teachers are becoming more mentors. And the most important thing is that they maintain their effective relationship with children. So I can say we need one more. This is our virtual campus of Escuela Nueva. Now we're training teachers through our virtual campus. It's mainly in Spanish, unfortunately. It's a big challenge for us because many other countries want to be inspired and to work with us, but this is our big challenge for next year. But we wanted to demonstrate that, yes, it is possible. And with this, I finished my presentation. I just wanted to make sure that I was on time. As Latin American speakers, we usually take more time than what is expected from us. So I just wanted to make sure that I finished on time. I think you got an idea of what we have been trying to do for the last almost 40 years.
Vicky, thank you so much. Can I just say, as an African, we also take a little bit of time, but we appreciate that. What an inspiring story, and thank you for sharing your insight. And I'd like to take this time to thank all the speakers who have contributed to this conversation, highlighting some of the gaps that exist in low resource environments, but more importantly, highlighting the solutions that could ignite a wave of the next education revolution. We're going to take a quick break. And in a moment, we'll be hosting a special segment to honor the life of Sir Ken Robinson, a man who contributed significantly to education, particularly around the conversation of cultivating creativity in students. If you are watching us on Identify or on other social media platforms, just check the comment section. Our team will get to you and we'll direct you to the next session. I hope you've enjoyed and see you soon. Bye.
When the students of today are the teachers of tomorrow, what will they say about the year 2020? Will this be the year that changed education forever? The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated existing inequalities in education systems everywhere. At the same time, we have all admired the educators, parents, students, and communities that have banded together to meet this challenge. The HundrED 2020 Innovation Summit will connect inspiring innovators with educators, researchers, policy leaders, education ministries, students, and parents from around the world. Join us at this free virtual event to share your experiences and learn from like-minded changemakers from over 100 countries. You will also hear from our global collection of leading innovators in K-12 education who are pioneering solutions that help provide quality education for all, no matter what happens. Register now at www.HundrED.org/summit.